Students and families, it's Pastor Billy, and welcome to another week. I was counting the other day. I think this is week like maybe 14, 15, something. It's been a long time since you and I have met in person, but hopefully one day, sometime soon, we'll be doing that. And I know I say that every week, but I'm really hoping and praying that this virus kind of lifts and things kind of get back to quote unquote a little bit of normality. But other than that, until then, we will continue doing videos, and I'll continue doing these week after week, and I hope that you guys are taking advantage of this as families, as students, and that you are just doing this together. And so anyway, again, I miss you. I cannot wait to meet with you in person. Well, if you have your Bibles tonight, go ahead and grab them. We're going to be in Acts chapter 20, and we're going to begin in verse 17. And while you're turning there, I want to introduce our new series that I've entitled Biblical Success. Biblical Success. And this is just a series that was laid on my heart and that I want to share with you. And so we're going to title it Biblical Success. You might say, why that title? Well, everywhere you look, whether it's YouTube, seminars, books, whatever the thing may be, is all talking about, they all have the one thing in common: how to live a successful life. How do you become successful in your business? How do you become successful as a husband? How do you be a successful wife? How are you a successful YouTuber? How are you? And it goes on and on and on. And so what I have noticed is that now in Bible college, they offer young pastors who are studying to be in the ministry, they offer them a class entitled Church Growth. And what this class is all about is they give you ways in which to quote unquote grow your church. Because if you'll notice, the success rate, if you will, or how we define success is different. So the first thing that I'm asked as a youth pastor, as a pastor period, is this: how many people is in your church? So when you tell them, hey, I'm a youth pastor at Bethel Baptist, the first question they ask me is, how big is your church? Second, how big is your youth group? Because somehow in our American minds, we have defined success about how many people we have attending our services. So I believe what we're doing is we're looking at success in all the wrong ways. We're viewing it in the wrong negative sense. That the church was never meant to be all about numerical growth. It was meant to be spiritually growing together that then results in numerical growth. So we're looking at success as Americans and not as, in a sense, Christians. So what I want us to do in the next couple weeks, few weeks here, is I want us to look at what does the Bible define as success. And we're going to be in Acts 20, the whole entire series, because what we're going to use is we're going to use Paul's farewell address to the church of Ephesus, to the elders of Ephesus, and how he defined spiritual success. How did he define biblical success? So where we are is Paul here. If you don't know who Paul is what we would call the spiritual hero of the New Testament. He's going to write almost over half the New Testament, the books, the Pauline epistles. He is pretty much all the way at the half of Acts, end of Acts. He's going to kind of be the hero, if you will, or the main character of that. And what we're going to be at here, picking up in Acts 20, is we're in Paul's third missionary journey. And he is on his way to the Jewish church. He's on his way to Jerusalem, and he's bringing a kind of a tithe and offering. He's bringing some gifts to the Jewish church from the Gentile church. And what he's trying to do is break this barrier between Gentile and Jew. And so he's on his way, and they stop at a place. He's on his boat, and they stop at a place called Maltus. And so we're going to look at that. Beginning in verse 17, it says, "And from Miletus he sent to Ephesus and called the elders of the church." So what's happening is Paul is on his way, like we said, he's on his way and he's going to stop there. They're going to journey about 30 miles from the church of Ephesus, and he's going to call for the elders. He's going to call for the spiritually mature people within the church, and he wants to give him his last little message, their last exhortation, the last challenge for these elders of Ephesus, and how to continue and how to successfully, biblically success. How do you do that for the Lord? So we pick up now in verse 18. It says, "And when they were come to him, he said unto them, You know from the first day that I came unto Asia, after what manner I have been with you at all seasons. serving the Lord with all humility of mind and with many tears and temptations, which befell me by the lying and the weight of the Jews. So what we're going to notice is biblical success can be defined by four aspects. We're only going to look at the first one tonight, but the four aspects are, what does your life look like when it comes to God? What does your life look like when it comes to God? What does your life look like when it comes to the church? What does your life look like when it comes to evangelism? What does your life look like when it comes to your own self? And so we're going to look at tonight, number one, what does your successful life biblically look like in serving the Lord? What does your life look like in serving the Lord? Well, Paul is going to say here, and he's going to talk to the church of the elders of the church of Ephesus, and he's going to say to them, hey guys, listen, from the moment that I met you, from the first moment I saw you, I have done this. And he's going to kind of lay it out through verses 17 through 20, or verses 19 through 24. He's going to lay out what he did in his ministry to be so, quote unquote, successful. And what we're going to find here is that Paul is talking to them, and it could be two reasons why he says this. It could be two reasons that he reminds them of why or how he did things. One, it could be he's just kind of giving them a blueprint, if you will, to how do you lead the church successfully? How do you lead the church to Christ-likeness? How do you guide them? Or it could be, second, it could be that Paul is talking to the church here and defending himself. If you'll notice, there's been some false teachers. We'll get into this more in just a minute. There's been some false teachers that rose up against Paul, and it could be that he's defending himself and saying, this is what I've continued to do. And if you don't believe me, you can go to verses 29 and 30 here in chapter 20. For the sake of time, we won't do that. But he's going to say, look, there's going to be wolves that rise up against you. People are going to turn. They're going to start preaching a false doctrine. And it could be that he's just defending himself. But regardless, he's going to give you two ways in which your life serving the Lord can be biblically successful. Two ways. One, serving the Lord takes humility. Serving the Lord takes humility. Notice in verse 19, he says, serving the Lord with all humility of mind. What we're going to notice about Paul through his entire life, in a way, since his conversion to Christianity, what we're going to notice through the Pauline epistles, through the book of Acts, through all this, is that Paul is strong. He's a strong-willed man. He believes what he believes. He stands up for what he believes is truth. But he's a humble man. He is a humble man. And you can notice that all through like 1st and 2nd Corinthians. You can notice that through his Pauline epistles. He says things like, I'm the chief of sinners. I'm the least of these. I'm nothing. I'm a nobody without Christ. And he's going to kind of always constantly talk about how he's a bondservant of Jesus and how he's lowly when it comes to his humility. When it comes to his service, he's humble. Now, service here means doulos. It's a Greek word meaning doulos. And basically what it means is that he was a bondservant to the Lord. And what Paul is going to say is, I was purchased by him through his blood, and I've served him with all humility. And so serving the Lord means this. It means I'm not serving, in a sense, man. What we have in our churches today is we have this wide variety of people who claim that they're serving the Lord, but in reality, they just want a pat on the back. They claim I'm doing everything that I'm doing for the Lord, right? I'm serving him, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, but there's really no humility about them whatsoever because they care more about what man thinks than what God thinks. And that's why Paul says in Galatians chapter 1, verse 10, he says, who do you please more, men or God? Because you cannot serve God successfully if you're worried about pleasing men. You just can't. Nowhere in the Bible are you going to find that. Paul here is saying, I have served the Lord with humility. I am a bondservant to him. I owe him everything, and I do that because I recognize what I am. I recognize that I am a sinner. I recognize that I have faults. I recognize that I am the chief of all these sinners. And I recognize without Christ, I have no future and I have no ability to serve. And that's what Paul's saying here. He's saying, I'm serving the Lord with all humility of mind. This is what I've done. I've served him humbly. And so I want to ask you this. If you are serving people, if you are serving in a church, if you are serving in a ministry, if you are serving anywhere, let me ask you, why are you doing it? Is it because you want to be recognized? Because here's the one thing that I get a lot, and I'm kind of confused on why. Not really, I kind of get it. But we say when the teens do a service project, we claim that the whole church should know that them teens went and served. Now, I understand you want to encourage them, and I understand I want to encourage you. But biblically, if we tell every time that you've done something, you let somebody know, are we really doing it for the right reason? Because what's going to happen is if we continue to tell everybody every time that we go and serve, then it's about us doing it and not the God doing it through us. True service happens when you don't even know what happened. True service happens when somebody goes out and we don't even realize it happened, and later on down the road we find out that you've served them or you've done this or that. That is biblical success when it comes to serving the Lord. So I want to ask you, are you doing it for man's applause? Are you doing it for the pat on the back? Because if you are, let me ask you this, how much recognition from men is enough? Because every time then you do something, you have to have that pat on the back. And what Paul is saying right here in verse 19 is, I've done this, I've served the Lord with humility of mind. I've done it for Him. Because we're going to notice why. Number two is, if you're going to do it with humility, if you're going to serve the Lord with humility, it's going to bring suffering. Now, there's two types of suffering that we're going to look at here, because Paul's going to make an interesting comment at the end of verse 19. He says, and with many tears and temptations which befell me by the lying in wait of the Jews. In other words, he says, not only have I served the Lord with humility, not only have I done all these things for Him and not for man, I didn't do it for the recognition, I didn't do it for the pleasure of them, I did it because I owe the Lord my life. I owe Him everything. And he says, with that though, came suffering. And his first part of suffering is internal. We're going to notice that's internal. It's an inner suffering. And so Paul here makes an interesting word. He uses an interesting word, with tears. With tears. Now, I've researched and studied, and through that, what we've noticed, commentators, different people, theologians, they notice that there's three major things through Paul's life that made him cry. One, if you go to Romans chapter 9, verses 2 through 3, what you're going to notice is that Paul wept over lost people. He wept over the lost. Number two, he wept over struggling Christians, according to 2 Corinthians 2, verse 4. Not only that, he wept over false teachers, according to Philippians chapter 3, verse 18. So here is my thing I want to ask you, and I want to challenge you. When is the last time that you internally suffered for the lost, for the suffering Christians, and for the false teachers? When is the last time that we inwardly suffered for Jesus? That we were broken, that we realized there were things within us, and we started crying for our family member that was lost. We started crying for the coach that was lost. We started crying for our friend that was lost. We started crying for the Christian that once was on fire but now has turned away. We were crying because there are pastors rising up in the pulpits that are preaching false doctrine, and we think that they're the heroes of the faith. When's the last time that we became broken inwardly, as Paul here is broken inwardly? He is saying, I've suffered. I've served the Lord with humility, and I've suffered because of it. I've suffered inwardly, but not only have I suffered inwardly, I suffered outwardly. Because he says the Jews have risen up against him and spread lies. What you're going to notice through the whole entire book of Acts is that people after people after people after people rise up against Paul. Paul has this massive conversion. He was once a guy that killed Christians. He became a Christian. And when he became a Christian, people rose up against him. So what you're going to notice is in Acts 13, verse 6, Paul's opposition starts with Bar-Jesus. He then, in Acts 13:45, he has opposition of the Jewish crowd accusing him of blasphemy. And then after town, after town, after town, after town, after town, what we're going to notice is that Paul continues to have Jewish people rise up and suffer. He suffers. They punish him. They throw him into prison. He's beaten, but yet he continues to serve the Lord with humility of mind. He never once looked at it as, I'm serving God. He owes me protection. Never once. Because when you serve with humility, it's naturally going to bring suffering because the Lord suffered. The Lord suffered. Jesus Christ himself suffered for you. He did. He died a humiliating death. He suffered. He bled. He was beaten so poorly his own mother didn't even recognize him. He suffered for you. What do you expect in return? What do we expect in return? We're going to suffer if you believe in Jesus. So here is kind of my challenge for you. Some people would judge your success as a believer with how large spread your ministry is. In other words, how many followers do you have? How many people do you have? How large is your church? How many degrees do you have? And however, your success is only built on how well you serve Christ. It's not built on numbers. It's not built on degrees. It's not built on how many books you've written. It's not built on your gathering and your following. Success as a believer, success as a Christian is how well have you served him. So here's my question. Have you served him with humility? Have you served him with suffering? So whatever you're going through tonight, you might say, man, I just feel like no one gets it. Keep doing the right thing. No one understands. Keep serving the Lord with humility. Keep being his servant because you owe him everything because he gave you everything. I love you guys. Have a great night. See you next week.